Hello everybody, in today's video we're going to be talking about what every attachment does within Modern Warfare, and that actually sounds like a huge task, especially if you ever actually kind of look through all the attachments. You know that there's a bunch of them. There's almost way too many attachments, and that's one of the upsides and downsides that they've decided to go with this particular Gunsmith. Previous Call of Duties, you'd go to a weapon, maybe they have like 5-6 attachments and several different optics, but other than that, pretty much straightforward. You kind of have an idea. Usually equip about 3 or 4 of them. In this particular case, there are like 50 to 60 attachments per weapon, and then that ends up making the game feel kind of grindy. You got to level it all the way up, unlock all the various attachments, and then you unlock various camos and stuff like that. Besides that, if we go to the muzzle, this is the most muzzles we've ever had in Call of Duty history. If you go to previous Call of Duties, we kind of just had a suppressor. Usually it reduced our range by about 25% depending on the game. And then in addition to that, it would keep you silent and suppressed off the minimap. Besides that, pretty much almost none of these exist. Some weapons would have some kind of like a melee attachment. Sometimes they'd have like a bayonet. When we go to the underbarrel, usually it was just grip. We didn't have grip 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We didn't have all these grips. It was just grip. So as a result of that, it creates a lot of confusion because people aren't really familiar with that system, or they're very accustomed to the previous system. So we're going to be talking about what each of the attachment does, how you can better have an idea what each attachment is doing while you're making the class setup, so you can make the best class setup possible, regardless if you're trying to play fast in multiplayer, play a little bit more passive, or if you're looking to play some Warzone where you want to focus primarily on range or whatever playstyle you're looking to go for. So by the end of today's video, hopefully we'll be able to help you out with that. If you do enjoy the video, learn something new, make sure you hit that like button. Go on today's video's 2,500 likes. If you're brand new, want to find your way back, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on so you'll be able to stay up to date with future Call of Duty content. So there's actually a website that has kind of gone out of their way to do this. I actually talked to the guy a couple different times in his live streams as well as through DMs. So the website that I'm going to be talking about today is CoDGunData.com, and it breaks down pretty much all the various attachments for all the various weapons, so you have a better idea of what is actually happening as you go through these attachments. And I'm actually going to talk about a couple different attachments. Maybe I learned something a little bit new, and I'm going to show you that it's actually accurate head-to-head comparison with and without that attachment. So let's go ahead and jump into the site. And obviously, as you can see, the making of this video, Unforgiven is live over on Twitch. So if you want to check him out, pick his brain, you're more than welcome to do that. All the links to this stuff will be down in the description. Right here, we also have the Twitter in case you want to message him that way or join that specific Discord. And I know they interact a lot through Reddit, and that's kind of how this started. He works with someone who does a little bit more of the web design. He does all the testing himself, kind of compares it, and he does all the testing at 240 hertz, which is significantly more accurate than the 60 hertz. I've been doing it, Exclusive Ace, Drifter, and a lot of the other content creators out there that go out of their way to make some of these types of tests. So let's go ahead and see how this works. So we're going to do a quick comparison tool, and we're going to go ahead and select assault rifle. It doesn't have it for every single weapon, but as you can see, there's 3 primary categories here. Probably got to add more to the site. Obviously, it's just one guy and the other web developer, so it takes a lot of time. So these other things at the top are ways to get in contact with him so he can actually improve and add things to the site. One of the things I like about it is sometimes there's different changes, and I don't necessarily keep them all track in order. I'm not as meticulous as some people, and it looks like he's done a really good job here. So let's say if we just go ahead and choose an assault rifle here, and then all we got to do is click next step. So once we do that, it's going to go ahead and choose the different attachments here. If I want to go with a lightweight suppressor or anything like that, we can go that route. And then you kind of have the option to do it really quickly here. The way that I personally like to do it is here is the full comparison tool. And this allows you to see all those various attachments side to side. So just when we're looking at right now, when we go to the M4A1, if I go next step, this is for the first attachment. So let's say we're going to go ahead and talk about the muzzle. All I do is click the muzzle, and it gives you the range modifier, the ADS speed, sprint to fire speed, tactical sprint to fire speed, movement speed, ADS movement speed, and this is strafing basically, vertical recoil, horizontal bounce, not necessarily stable like recoil because it does have a little bit of bounce, so I guess that's the stabilization factor. Hip fire area, whether it increases or decreases based on the attachment. Bullet velocity, which is particularly important within this Call of Duty because what happened in previous Call of Duties, every Call of Duty before Black Ops 4 was hit scan. Even in the beginning of Black Ops 4, some of the weapons were actually projectile based, but because of Blackout, they went and changed some things out, and then in multiplayer, they pretty much made it so almost every gun was those hit scan, if it's lined up when you pull the trigger, those bullets hit instantly. Versus with the projectile system, it really depends on the velocity of the projectile. So one thing you'll notice right here is the lightweight suppressor. It's going to hurt your range by about 20%, and it's going to hurt the bullet velocity, which ends up being pretty significant when you start comparing some attachments. How much bullet velocity you're going to get will make it so that those bullets register later. And if somebody has a little bit better bullet velocity, they might be able to hit their shots a little bit easier. It might be able to easier to track where your bullets are actually going because they have a little bit more oomph behind them instead of kind of just dying off a little bit early. So right here, we can see the monolithic suppressor is going to increase that range by about 10%. It's going to slow down your aim down sight time by 25 milliseconds. And this is one of the benefits of doing everything at 240 Hertz. You get significantly more accurate as you're kind of stacking all these different things because you're able to have 4 times the frames that we have been using at 60 Hertz, which means there's significantly more precision. If we were doing this on 60 Hertz, this would look like 1.5 frames, 1.5 frames, about 1 frame, and a little bit faster than 1 frame. So at the end of the day, you'd be like, 1 frame, they're pretty close. But in reality, between the compensator and the monolithic suppressor, there's literally double that difference. So let's say we go ahead and click on that. All we do is do next step, and it'll move to the second attachment. And this is where we go for the barrel, and this kind of where we can compare a lot of those attachments, and you can see how a lot of these hidden stats, I say hidden because they're not explicitly stated within the attachments, and what we'll go ahead and look at specifically is the M16 and the Corvus Custom, which are the main 2 barrels most people use. Some people mess around with some of the other ones, mainly in multiplayer and maybe 6v6, but for the most part, people are using either the M16 or the Corvus. If we look at these head to head, you can see there's a 10% difference in overall range. You can see that this one is slower by about 21 milliseconds. You can see the movement speed is different there. We can see the vertical recoil is a little bit better with the M16. Obviously, that's a trade-off of having slower. But the bigger difference here too that you can notice is the hip fire area. As you put on a longer barrel, it actually spreads out that hip fire spread and makes it harder for you to fire while in the hip fire and those bullets actually connecting. So one thing to keep in mind with the longer the barrel, it's going to be a little bit harder to hip fire. So in SMG cases, that might be a significant difference between choosing one barrel and another, especially if you're not really worried about range and you're going to be barrel stuffing your opponent. On top of that, you can see the difference in bullet velocity between those 2 barrels. It ends up being that they're almost identical. So head to head, when you compare those barrels, there's a lot going for each option. It really just depends on if you want that extra recoil control, you want a little bit of extra range, and if you want to hurt your hip fire spread. So it depends on your play style, which one you're going to actually go with. I know when the game first came out, a lot of people were like, why are you running this one? That one's significantly better. And there's a lot of stats that go into it, and that's where it makes it too confusing. Obviously, Call of Duty used to be pretty simple. 1 barrel, you put on long barrel. That's all it would be. And you just get more range, and there was no downsides. Pretty straightforward system, but they've made it a little bit more complex to kind of fit into the realism, add a little bit more grindiness with more attachments, and this is what we get as a result. A system that is very confusing and that you basically need some tables and spreadsheets and all this stuff to figure out what is best and what is better each individual weapon. So we'll go ahead and go with the M16 since that's what most people are using for Warzone. Then we'll go ahead and click next. So now when we go over here, we can go ahead and swap down and maybe go to the ammunition. You can see the difference here. There is a difference in 1% movement speed and overall ADS speed. So let's go ahead and go with the 60 round mag. 2 milliseconds is nothing, so we might as well go for that, especially since our second option will probably be an SMG of some kind. If we're going to go with the sniper, maybe we only go with the 50 round mag, so we're a little bit closer and we can deal damage at those ranges and maybe get a little bit of extra mobility out of it. But let's just say we go 60 round, click on that one, and then go next. Now we got to worry about the next couple attachments. And the one that I wanted to talk about specifically is this underbarrel. And I was kind of going through and just kind of looking and seeing, kind of comparing how some of these numbers look to my individual test. And a lot of stuff lined up and everything was pretty accurate. And then I got to this one right here. If you guys can see it on your screen, it says Merc foregrip. And then it says there's a movement speed bonus. And I was like, let me go ahead and check this out. So I ended up messaging him. I said, are you sure that's accurate? Because I've never necessarily tested movement speed because it's not listed there. But there's a lot of things that aren't listed there. So I said, all right, cool. Was that accurate? He said, yep, it's definitely accurate. So I went ahead and tested it myself, and here's what it ended up looking like on screen. So on the left, you can see the base Uzi, and on the right is with the Merc foregrip. So the one on the right should end up coming out faster, and as you'll see, it does end up hitting the wall faster, even though they started at the exact same time. And for me, this ends up being an issue because this should not be the case. That is not included anywhere on the attachment. If we look in game and we go to the Merc foregrip, let's go ahead and look at it. It says recoil control, hipfire accuracy, aim, walking, movement speed, and then it says aim down sight speed. Even the mobility is in red on the screen, so the bars aren't lined up. And I just showed you right there, it ended up being around 3% faster in my test to run a Merc foregrip over no grip, which makes no sense. Obviously, if you add more attachments, it should add weight. Organically, your gun should be a little bit slower when you move around. But in the particular case, when it comes to the Merc foregrip, it's either coded wrong or that was intended, but they never included the actual stats. So that's why these can't necessarily be trusted. I know there's a lot of issues that come into that, primarily when it comes to these perk attachments. If you go all the way down to FMJ, it's going to say that you get extra bullet penetration, which is cool. And it says more damage. A lot of times people assume that your bullets will physically just do more damage when you shoot a player, but unless there's an object in the way, it's not going to really do anything. Head-to-head gunfight doesn't help. When you're shooting through a piece of cover, let's say this particular cover would reduce your damage by about 10%. This just makes it so that it doesn't reduce it by that damage, and you still get full damage through certain objects. Obviously, the larger the object, the less reduction you're going to have, but that's kind of how that part works. The other one that gets a little bit tricky, just because it says it there, and I don't think a lot of people fall for it, is sleight of hand. Obviously, if you reload faster, you're going to be able to put out bullets faster within 1 minute. Reload, fire all the way, reload, fire all the way. With faster reload, you're going to be able to fire your weapon quicker, but that doesn't mean it has a faster rate of fire. And if you look at on the screen here, you can see right here, there is a little bit of green on that bar that says for fire rate, which shouldn't even be there. This should just be reload time, and it should say 2.2 seconds. And when you use sleight of hand, it drops it to 2.0 seconds, and you save 20% or 10% or whatever the case is. That's what it should do, but this is almost purposely misleading and confusing, so people don't know necessarily what to run. All we know is it's faster. By how much? It's inconsistent. So that's one of the things I want to talk about there. Let's go ahead and finish the class setup portion of it, and I'll show you one of the best features about this specific app. So we'll go ahead and breeze through these real quick. Let's go ahead and put in the Merc foregrip. We get the extra mobility, fifth attachment. We'll do attack laser so we get faster aim down sight. Once that's all done there, we'll go ahead and do save and add another. And that'll generate there. Now, if we go through, we want to compare another rifle. Let's say we want to compare the Ram 7. We'll go next. And I'm going to do all these pretty quickly because for the interest of kind of going through it, since I've already went through it. Muzzle, we're going to do monolithic. So they go head to head, longest barrel. Laser, we're going to go attack laser. We're going to keep the iron sights. We're going to do underbarrel. We're going to do the Merc foregrip. And then we're going to go to ammunition. We're going to put on the largest barrel. You can see it's 8 seconds, which is actually slower than we saw in the 4 and 6 seconds. So we'll kind of see how that plays out head to head. Movement speed, and then we'll go ahead and go to save and generate summary. Now we have a head-to-head comparison here, which is pretty cool. You can see that overall, you're not getting hard numbers here just yet. Aim down sight speed, you can see that the Ram 7 ends up winning that. Sprint to fire is the same just because they're in the rifle category. Tactical sprint to fire, same. Mobility, the Ram 7 is just a little bit faster. As far as ADS movement speed, you get straight faster with the Ram 7, even though it's not a huge difference. Recoil control, we have the same attachment, so we're getting pretty similar benefit. Hip fire spread, right around the same. Bullet velocity, a little bit faster on the Ram, so it'll feel like your bullets connect just a little bit quicker because they have a little bit more oomph, but the difference between these two is very negligible. And then reload time, you have that there. So now what we can do is actually compare these damage head to head. And this looks very familiar for some of you guys. If you guys have been following my channel for a while, I've kind of done these graphs on the regular, but one of the cool things about this particular one is it allows you to kind of just put in whatever values you want. So if you're testing something specific, if you want to include the bullet travel time, you can. Normally mine didn't include that because I had no really accurate way of testing that. And as you can see, this is what the TTK looks like for those individual weapons at the various drop-offs for the individual weapons. If we go to headshot, you can get the time to kill. And then if you wanted to include the bullet travel time, there's going to be a slight angle to these because the TTK kind of changes depending on the distance. So head to head, you can see that the Ram ends up winning here. for a couple meters, then it drops off, and these give you the specific numbers. So this is a cool feature for me. It kind of saves me some time if I've already tested these to see if, hey, you know what, does mine compare to this one? Does it line up fairly well? And then you can see that part. If you want to include the ADS time as part of it, so if it's a very slow ADS time, since these ones are about the same, it can impact it, especially when you use an LMG. If you want to really see, all right, how slow is the LMG compared to my primary option? If the weapon has an open bolt delay, you can include that. Obviously with these, they don't have that, so it's not an issue. That's usually for most LMGs, the Uzi, and maybe a couple other weapons. But for the most part, you don't really have to worry about this. Since it's really a small number in terms of time to kill, at least in my opinion. So that's how the site works, and I'm sure there's going to be different improvements along the way. If there's things maybe you notice, you just let them know, and they're going to go in, maybe test it, fix it, and this ends up saving me a lot of time where I can focus more on tips versus actually just breaking down weapon mechanics, which is very time consuming, especially if I don't have someone the drop of the hat to test that with me. So hopefully you guys get to take advantage of this. I think it works on mobile as well. If you did enjoy the video, let me know by hitting that like button. If you're brand new, want to find your way back for more Call of Duty content, definitely make sure you subscribe with notifications on. The links to this is all in the description. So if you want to experiment, find out some fun new things, definitely go check it out. I do appreciate all the support on the channel. Thank you for watching. As always, have a great day.